Here's a little reading of Conrad Aiken, some background. This remarkable American poet is now much neglected. A sorrow I contend against in my introduction to a new augmented edition of his selected poems. Aiken seems resented by some for his continuous eloquence, the superb music of his poetic voice and stance. This prejudice will vanish, and Aiken's permanent place in American poetic tradition will be reestablished. Aiken, the oldest of 4 children, was 11 years old when his father shot his mother and then killed himself. Only a very strong consciousness could have survived the experience of first discovering the bodies, as Aiken did. Adopted by an uncle, which moved the future poet from Savannah, Georgia to Cambridge, Massachusetts, he attended Harvard, where he formed a lifelong friendship with T.S. Eliot. The poet's first 2 marriages failed, but the third prospered and was still ongoing when he died in Savannah, having returned full circle to his birthplace in 1962. His friendship with the novelist Malcolm Lowry, author of Under the Volcano, did much to foster Lowry's achievement. Aiken's own work included a remarkable autobiography. I'd like to read that. Ushant, 1952, and his vast collected poems, 1953, which was followed by 6 more volumes of poetry before his death. The first of his several novels, Blue Voyage, still sustains rereading. It's making me realize I should get some new books. I'm going to get a few of these. I have included 5 poems by Aiken, all of which have haunted me and stayed in my memory for many years. Morning Song of Cynllun could be termed Aiken's archetypal poem, intensely lyrical, romantic, assured in its nihilism, and In the Hanging Gardens, a particular favorite, strikes me as what Trumbell Stickney, a Harvard poet long before Aiken, might have written had he survived. Sea Holly is an exquisitely harsh confrontation of the barren or wasted beauty of an old woman, and the wave-lashed rocks, showing Aiken at his subtlest. It is followed here by the first of Aiken's preludes, in which the poet's own consciousness sharply meditates upon its sense of mortality. I like this one. After all this, I might say a couple things more relevant to whatever's going on, I guess. But first, Morning Song of Cynllun. I guess it's longer than this. I'd like to read the whole thing. It's just an excerpt. It is morning, Cynllun says, and in the morning, when the light drips through the shutters like the dew, I arise, I face the sunrise, and do the things my fathers learned to do. Stars in the purple dusk above the rooftops, pale in a saffron mist and seem to die, and I myself on a swiftly tilting planet stand before a glass and tie my tie. Vine leaves tap my window, dewdrops sing to the garden stones, the robin chirps in the chinaberry tree, repeating 3 clear tones. It is morning. I stand by the mirror and tie my tie once more, while waves far off in a pale rose twilight crash in a coral shore. I stand by a mirror and comb my hair, how small and white my face. The green earth tilts through a sphere of air and bathes in a flame of space. There are houses hanging above the stars, and stars hung under a sea. I like this next line. And a sun far off in a shell of silence dapples my walls for me. It is morning, Cynllun says, and in the morning should I not pause in the light to remember God? Upright and firm I stand on a star unstable. He is immense and lonely as a cloud. I will dedicate this moment before my mirror to him alone. For him I will comb my hair. Accept these humble offerings, cloud of silence. I will think of you as I descend the stair. Vine leaves tap my window, The snail track shines on the stones. Dewdrops flash from the chinaberry tree, repeating two clear tones. It is morning. I awake from a bed of silence. Shining, I rise from the starless waters of sleep. The walls are about me, still as in the evening. I am the same, and the same name still I keep. The earth revolves with me, yet makes no motion. The stars pale silently in a coral sky. In a whistling void I stand before my mirror, unconcerned in time by time. There are horses neighing on far-off hills, tossing their long white manes, and mountains flash in the rose-white dusk, their shoulders black with rains. It is morning. I stand by the mirror and surprise my soul once more. The blue air rushes above my ceiling. There are suns beneath my floor. It is morning, Cynllun says. I ascend from darkness and depart on the winds of space, for I know not where. My watch is wound, my key is in my pocket, and the sky is darkened as I descend the stair. There are shadows across the window, clouds in heaven, and a God above the stars, and I will go thinking of him as I might think of daybreak, and humming a tune I know. Vine leaves tap at the window, dewdrops sing to the garden stones, the robin chirps in the chinaberry tree, repeating three clear tones. That poem, I like that poem a lot. Structurally, it's very different from the next one. I think it's what it's called a staikic poem, I believe, unless I have the terms reversed. But a staikic poem, all of the sort of the syntactic units are arranged more or less neatly into lines. The line breaks correspond to the breaks in the syntactic units and the meaning units of the poem. The next one is more of the sort of flowing, surging title kind of poem, a strophic poem. Paradise Lost is a strophic poem. I think this one's more strophic too. It's a completely different kind of poem, kind of reading. I don't like it quite as much, but it's instructive, I guess. It's more like a narrative. Let's see how it goes. It's called it. And in the hanging gardens. And in the hanging gardens there is rain from midnight until 1, striking the leaves and bells of flowers, and stroking bowls of plains, and drawing slow arpeggios over pools, and stretching strings of sound from eaves to ferns. The princess reads, the knave of diamonds sleeps. The king is drunk and flings a golden goblet down from the turret window, curtained with rain into the lilacs, and at 1 o'clock the Vulcan under the garden wakes and beats the gong upon his anvil. Then the rain ceases, but gently ceases, dripping still, and sound of falling water fills the dark as leaves grow bold and upright, and as eaves part with water. The princess turns the page beside the candle and between two braids of golden hair and reads, from there I went northward a journey of 4 days and came to a wild village in the hills where none was living save the vulture and the rat and one old man who laughed but could not speak. The roofs were fallen in, the well grown over with weed, and it was there my father died. Then 8 days further, bearing slightly west, the cold winds blowing against our faces, the food tasting of sand, and as we stood by the dry rock that marks the highest point, my brother said, not too late is it yet to turn, remembering home. And we were silent, thinking of home. The princess shuts her eyes, feels the tears forming beneath her eyelids, and opens them, and tears fall on the page. The knave of diamonds in the darkened room throws off his covers, sleeps, and snores again. The king goes slowly down the turret stairs to find the goblet, and at 2 o'clock the Vulcan in his smithy underground, under the hanging gardens where the drip of rain among the clematis and ivy still falls from sipping flower to purple flower, smites twice his anvil, and the murmur comes among the roots and vines. The princess reads, as I am sick, and cannot write you more, nor have not long to live, I give this letter to him, my brother, who will bear it south and tell you how I died. Ask how it was, there in the northern desert where the grass was withered, and the horses All but one perished. The princess drops her golden head upon the page between her two white arms and golden braids. The knave of diamonds wakes, and at his window in the darkened room watches the lilacs tossing, where the king seeks for the goblet. And at 3 o'clock the moon inflames the lilac heads, and thrice the Vulcan in his root-bound smithy clangs his anvil. And the sounds creep softly up among the vines and walls. The moon is round, round as a shield above the turret top. The princess blows her candle out, and weeps in the pale room where the scent of lilac comes, weeping, with hands across her eyelids, thinking of withered grass, withered by sandy wind. The knave of diamonds in his darkened room holds in his hands a key, and softly steps along the corridor and slides the key into the door that guards her. Meanwhile, slowly, the king, with raindrops on his beard and hands, and dripping sleeves, climbs up to the turret stairs, holding the goblet upright in one hand, and pauses on the midmost step to taste one drop of wine, wherewith wild rain has mixed. Phew. Lordy, lordy. So, I am just here in my apartment. I mean, my house. I guess it's a house. I live in a house now. Still not used to calling it that. Drink a little bit of beer. My wife is visiting a friend, and my children are asleep, or at least they should be asleep. Got some roses. Yeah. You can see them. Some roses. Roses. Flowers. Plants. Anyway, I'm not used to having the camera flipped around the other direction. Makes me want to show and tell or something, but I really just wanted to. Let me see if I can place this camera down. Around here there was a protest earlier today. There were helicopters flying above the sky. And I was supposed to go through this street originally. My next door neighbor is a cop, and I guess there are a lot of cops in this neighborhood. So they wanted to go through, but mostly it's peaceful. Pittsburgh's a relatively peaceful town. It's mostly a white town. Most of I checked into the live feed of the protest that happened here. It was a mostly white crowd. I really liked this article I read. I think I linked it in the comment section of my last video to Chris Alton. It was an article written for the American Affairs Journal about the genre fiction of the professional class. And he was talking about how for a genre to survive, it has to invert its tropes. So, I mean, he's talking about it's in reference to sort of the way in which the modern day bureaucracies drape themselves in countercultural coverings to disguise the fact that they are monoliths, I guess. Sorry for chewing. Can't seem to stop myself. I popped some popcorn. So the incredible quality for ability of these of corporations to kind of absorb the counterculture, to fly the rainbow flag. Now there's Burger King for Black Lives Matter. The whole thing becomes ridiculous. But in a way, that's kind of the genius of capitalism. I started reading a book. Sorry, I know I'm chewing again. I started reading a book called Passions and the Interests. I believe it's relatively well aligned with Strauss, although it's written by a different breed of exiled German Jew named Albert Hirschman. But it's a ambitious historical survey of the past 200 years. If anybody wants me to send it to them, just email me. cxejohns@gmail.com. Or I'll post in the comments if you want. Man, once you pop, you just can't stop with these popcorns. But but in that book, a description is given of a man running from those who wish to take his life, to lynch him, and to distract his pursuers. A man throws down a pile of money, and the men become occupied with picking up the individual banknotes, and he marvels at their benevolent self-interest. That as a kind of parable for the way in which capitalism, as a description, mind you, not as necessarily an ideology, as a description of how capitalism tends to absorb, redirect, and channel the violent tendencies and vices of men. So, these libidinal urges of ours, due to our sin, Adam's sin, and a properly oiled capitalist system get channeled. And it's kind of a good thing, you could say. And there's sort of a twinge of irony to that, but sort of a good thing overall, that rather than engage in sort of violence and savagery, people would channel those urges into, into the desire for gain. I mean, there's a problematic point, though, being made at the same time about how the culture of honor from several hundred years ago gave way to the culture of gain. At some point, seeking wealth became honorable. But the reason it's relevant is because, just as a sort of loose-fitting theory for why everything's happening right now, I think when people are unemployed, this mass unemployment, when people don't see a viable path upward economically, whether or not that's even true, but the fact that it's perceived that way means that they're no longer picking up those banknotes off the ground, you know what I mean? The drugged meat that you feed the guard dog. Economic gain is no longer a satisfactory palliative. And so, the kind of libidinal urges and tendencies of men are rising to the surface.